यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रजजनरञ्जन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन्ना वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन यमुनातीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय कृष्ण रुक्मिणी जय सत्यभामा कृष्ण रुक्मिणी जय सत्यभामा जय कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम कृष्ण बलराम जय कृष्ण बलराम जय निताय गौरंग जय निताय गौरंग निताय गौरंग जय निताय गौरंग जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शतश्री श्रीमद His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravindra Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada की ग्रंथराज Srimad-Bhagavatam की जय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। Reading from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto number 2, Chapter number 1, the first step in God realization, text number 39. Sa sarvadhi vritti anubhuta sarva sa sarvadhi vritti anubhuta sarva आत्मा यथा स्वप्नजनेक्षितैकः आत्मयता स्वप्नजनेक्षितैकः तं सत्यम आनंदनिधिं भजेत तं सत्यमानंदनिधिं भजेत नान्यत्र सज्जेद यथा आत्मपातः नान्यत्र सज्जेद यत आत्मपातः स सर्वधीवृत्यनुभूत सर्वा आत्मा यथा स्वप्नजनेक्षितैकः तं सत्यमानन्दनिधिं भजेत नान्यत्र सज्जेद यथा आत्मपातः स सर्वधीवृत्यनुभूत सर्वा आत्मा यथा स्वप्नजनेक्षितैकः तं सत्यमानन्दनिधिं भजेत नान्यत्र सज्जेद यथा आत्मपातः Word to word meaning. Saha, he, the Supreme Person. Sarvadhi Vritti, the process of realization by all sorts of intelligence. Anubhuta, cognizant. Sarve, everyone. Atma, the super soul. Yatha, as much as. Swapna Jana, a person dreaming. Ikshita, seen by. Ekaha, one and the same. Tam, unto him. Satyam, the supreme truth. Anandanidhim, the ocean of bliss. Bhajeta, must one worship. Na, never. Anyatra, anything else. Sajjet, be attached. Yataha, whereby. Atmapataha, degradation of oneself. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One should concentrate his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. One must concentrate the mind on him, the only all blissful absolute truth. Otherwise, one will be misled and will cause his own degradation. Please repeat this translation. One should concentrate his mind upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who alone distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. One must concentrate the mind on him, the only all blissful absolute truth. Otherwise, one will be misled and will cause his own degradation. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the process of devotional service is indicated by the great Goswami Srila Shukadeva. He tries to impress upon us that instead of diverting our attention to several branches of self-realization, we should concentrate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the supreme object of realization, worship and devotion. Self-realization is, as it were, offering a fight for eternal life against the material struggle for existence, and therefore, by the illusory grace of the external energy, the yogi or the devotee is faced with many allurements which can entangle a great fighter again in the bondage of material existence. A yogi can attain miraculous success in material achievements such as anima and lagima, by which one can become more minute than the minutest, or lighter than the lightest, or in the ordinary sense, one may achieve material benedictions in the shape of wealth and women. But one is warned against such allurements because entanglement again in such illusory pleasure means degradation of the self and further imprisonment in the material world. By this warning, one should follow one's vigilant intelligence only. The Supreme Lord is one and His expansions are various. He is therefore the super soul of everything. When a man sees anything, he must know that his seeing is secondary and the Lord's seeing is primary. One cannot see anything without the Lord's having first seen it. That is the instruction of the Vedas and Upanishads. So, whatever we see or do, the super soul of all acts of seeing or doing is the Lord. This theory of simultaneous oneness and difference between the individual soul and the super soul is propounded by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. The Virat Rupa, or the gigantic feature of the Supreme Lord, includes everything materially manifested, and therefore the Virat or gigantic feature of the Lord is the super soul of all living and non-living entities. But the Virat Rupa is also the manifestation of Narayana or Vishnu, and going further on and on, one will eventually see that Lord Krishna is the ultimate soul of everything that be. The conclusion is that one should unhesitatingly become a worshipper of Lord Krishna, or for that matter, his plenary expansion Narayana, and none else. In the Vedic hymns, it is clearly said that first of all, In the Vedic hymns, it is clearly said that first of all, Narayana cast a glance over matter and thus there was creation. Before creation, there was neither Brahma nor Shiva, and what to speak of others. Sripada Shankaracharya has definitely accepted this, that Narayana is beyond the material creation, and that all others are within the material creation. The whole material creation, therefore, is one with and different from Narayana simultaneously, and this supports the Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Being an emanation from the glancing potency of Narayana, the whole material creation is non-different from him. But because it is the effect of his external energy, Bahiranga Maya, and is aloof from the internal potency Atma Maya, The whole material creation is different from him at the same time. The example given in this verse very nicely is that of the dreaming man. The dreaming man creates many things in his dream, and thus he himself becomes the entangled seer of the dream and is also affected by the consequences. This material creation is also exactly a dream-like creation of the Lord, but he, being the transcendental super soul, is neither entangled nor affected by the reactions of such a dream-like creation. He is always in his transcendental position, but essentially he is everything, and nothing is apart from him. As a part of him, one should therefore concentrate on him only without deviation, otherwise one is sure to be overcome by the potencies of the material creation, one after another. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.7 as follows: Sarva bhutani kaunteya prakritim yanti mamikam kalpakshaye punasthani kalpadau visrujami aham. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, every material manifestation enters into my nature. And at the beginning of another millennium, by my potency, I again create. The human life, however, is an opportunity to get out of this repetition of creation and annihilation. It is a means whereby one may escape the Lord's external potency and enter into his internal potency. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports of the second canto, first chapter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, entitled The First Step in God Realization. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This is the final verse of this chapter, wherein Shukadeva Goswami is explaining to Parikshit Maharaj as to how one has to meditate on the universal form of the Lord as a step towards self-realization. And in all the previous descriptions, in all the previous verses, we have seen Shukadeva Goswami give the description of the different forms of the Virat Rupa and how one has to focus on this form, and for anyone who realizes liberation, how one can meditate on this form and attain self-realization. So in this final verse of this chapter, Shukadeva Goswami is summarizing, he's describing the nature of that absolute truth, where he says that the absolute truth is Sarvadi Vritti Anubhuta Sarva Atmayata Swapna Janekshitaikaha Tam Satyam Ananda Nidhim. This is the description Shukadeva Goswami is giving. He is saying that this Supreme Personality of Godhead, he distributes himself in so many manifestations, just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. So this is the first description here which Shukadeva Goswami is giving about the Lord, that the Lord has distributed himself in so many manifestations. How has he distributed himself into so many manifestations? That in the purport Prabhupada is explaining that it was only Narayana who existed before material creation. There was neither Brahma nor Shiva nor others. And even Shankaracharya has accepted that Narayana is beyond this material creation. And this entire material creation is emanating from the glance of the Supreme Lord Narayana. So everything that exists in this world, whether it is Brahma or Shiva or this material manifestation, all of this is emanating from the Lord. Not only that, even all the different incarnations are also emanating from the Lord Himself. Therefore, everything that is existing in this world, so many incarnations, so many demigods, the entire material manifestation which is present in the body of the Virat Rupa, all of this is nothing but an emanation of the Lord and the Lord's energies. So this is the first description which is being given in this verse, and this is compared to just as ordinary persons create thousands of manifestations in dreams. So this material world is also a dream-like creation of the Lord. So He desires this material world to be formed, and so many worlds are being created. It is just like the example given is just like a man at the time of dreaming, he creates so many things. Similarly, the Lord is also creating this material world just by dreaming. But there is a difference, Srila Prabhupada says. He says the difference is that the dreaming man becomes entangled in the dream and is affected by the consequences. Shri Krishna Rukmini Satyabhama ki, Gaur Nitai ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So when we dream, we are completely absorbed in the dream and we are experiencing all the events that are happening in the dream. So we are not realizing that it is actually a dream. But in the case of the Lord, He is not entangled by this material creation. He is only a silent witnesser or observer. He is not affected by this creation of this material world. This is because when we are dreaming, we are under illusion. We are thinking in terms of I and mine. The entire root of illusion is to think I am this body and everything that I see around it is mine, which is not the case. We are neither these bodies and none of these things which we see belong to us. But in the case of the Lord, because He is the supreme proprietor and He is the cause of all causes, He is not under illusion. When He is creating this world, which may even be temporary, He is not entangled because He is the supreme proprietor of all these energies. But in our case, when we are dreaming, we are under the illusion that I am this body and everything connected to this body is mine. So this is the difference that Prabhupada is bringing out here. And the other aspect Prabhupada says is that the Supreme Lord is Tam Satyam Ananda Nidhim, that He is the only all blissful absolute truth. So Ananda Nidhim means He is a treasure of all happiness, the ocean of bliss, in the word-to-word meaning Prabhupada says. So this material world is created because there are so many living entities who are desiring for this happiness, and we are coming to this material world seeking happiness. But actually the source of all happiness is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Ananda Nidhi. But forgetting that, all the living entities, they are seeking for happiness in this material world, which Krishna says is actually Dukkhalayam Ashashvatam. Therefore, the recommendation of Shukadeva Goswami is that if you don't want to be misled, if you don't want to be degraded, if you want to experience that eternal happiness, then you don't get distracted by so many different manifestations which are there in this material world. We are all attracted to these different manifestations in this material world thinking these will give us happiness. But Shukadeva Goswami is saying, don't get distracted by so many of these different manifestations which are there, so many different processes of self-realization which are there, which are either incorrect or incomplete. We can attain unending happiness only if we focus on the all blissful absolute truth. Tam satyam ananda nidim bhajeta nanyatra sajjed yata atma pataha. Any other process we follow, nanyatra sajjed, what happens? Yata atma pataha. We will again fall down. So the purpose of this material creation, and within this material creation, the human form of life, Prabhupada is saying, is an opportunity to get out of this repetition of creation and annihilation. So the purpose of this creation is not to enjoy the different material manifestations, but to come out of this. And how do we come out of this? We come out of this by meditating on the cause of this material creation. The person who is the cause of this material creation, who is the source of all happiness, only when we meditate on him, we can be happy. This is what Shukadeva Goswami is saying in this verse. Now, when we read, when we understand that it is everything that exists, either in the spiritual world or the material world, is the Lord himself. This is accepted by many people. They say that everything we see in this world is ultimately the Lord's energies. So, if we understand this, that everything is God's energy, and we deal with the Lord's energy only when we are dealing with the Lord's energy, then everything should be spiritual. So, even though I am carrying out my duties in this material world, I am dealing with so many material things, I will not get entangled. So I am only appreciating the different things which the Lord has given, and I am enjoying that. So because everything is God, ultimately there is no difference between matter and spirit. And that is how people come to the conclusion that you are also God, I am also God, because ultimately we are all God's energies. So, but what they don't understand is that the Lord's energies are also categorized into different categories. This understanding was given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's especially there in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And this was given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his discourses both with Ramananda Rai and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, where he talks about the three different energies of the Lord and what is the effect of associating with the different natures. So and Prabhupada is also pointing out that in the purport, where he says that, he says that this human life is an opportunity to escape from the Lord's external potency and enter into his internal potency. So the Lord's, while everything that we see in this world is a potency or energy of the Lord, one should be intelligent enough to distinguish between the different potencies of the Lord. Or one has to be intelligent to understand the nature of each potency. So that's why Prabhupada says, as a part of him, one should therefore concentrate on him only without deviation. Otherwise, one is sure to be overcome by the potencies of material creation, one after another. And at another place also in this purport, Prabhupada is telling that, self-realization is, as it were, offering a fight for eternal life against material struggle for existence. And therefore, by the illusory grace of external energy, the yogi or the devotee is faced with many allurements which can entangle a great fighter again in the bondage of material existence. So, at several places in this purport, Prabhupada is, after highlighting that the Lord is only manifesting himself as this material world, Prabhupada is also highlighting the effect of associating with the various energies of the Lord. So, in this conversation with Ramananda Rai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talks about these three different energies. We will just read that. This is in Madhya Leela, chapter number 6. Yeah. So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Antaranga Chit Shakti Tatastha Jiva Shakti Bahiranga Maya Tini Kare Prema Bhakti. The spiritual potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead also appears in three phases: internal, marginal, and external. These are all engaged in his devotional service in love. Then he says, Shadvida Aishwarya Prabhura Chit Shakti Vilasa Hena Shakti Nahi Mana Paramasahasa. In his spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulences. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impudence. Mayadisha Mayavasha Ishware Jive Bheda Hena Jive Ishwarasaha Kahata Abheda. The Lord is the master of the potencies, and the living entity is the servant of them. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. However, you declare that the Lord and the living entities are one and the same. Gita Shastre Jiva Rupa Shakti Kari Mane Hena Jive Bhedakare Ishwarera Sane. In the Bhagavad Gita, the living entity is established as the marginal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yet you say that the living entity is completely different from the Lord. So you see that in this conversation, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is bringing out the difference between the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the inferior energy. Antaranga Shakti, Bahiranga Shakti, and Tatastha Shakti. So here Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that in his internal potency, what is the Lord doing? He is enjoying all 6 kinds of opulences. That's why in this verse, Shukadeva Goswami is saying the Lord is Ananda Nidhim. He is the supreme, he is supremely enjoying. All 6 opulences he is enjoying. But if somebody doesn't have this understanding, then he can equate the Lord's enjoyment also to be material enjoyment. But it is not material enjoyment, it is completely spiritual. In a spiritual potency, the Supreme Lord enjoys 6 kinds of opulence. You do not accept this spiritual potency, and this is due to your great impudence. So the problem with people who think that, you are also God, I am also God, they think like that because they do not understand the difference between the Lord and the living entity. So that is why they say that when we come to this world, it is part of our Leela. They don't understand that we are marginal energy. That is, we are not the controller of all the energies, but the Supreme Lord, He is the controller of all the energies. So, He is never overcome by illusion. But in the case of the living entity is overcome by illusion, and our enjoyment in this material world cannot be compared to the enjoyment of the Lord in the spiritual world. So, this understanding is very important. And then Srila Prabhupada is also telling that the Lord is the master, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is saying, the Lord is the master of the potencies and the living entity is the servant of them. That is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. And this is also confirmed in the Mundaka Upanishad, where it is said, Dva Suparna Sayudya Sakhaya Samanam Briksham Parisavajate Tayor Anya Pippalam Swadvati Anashnan Anyo Bichakshati Samane Vriksho Purusho Nimagno Nishaya Shochati Muhyamanaha Jushtam Yada Pashyati Anyamisham Asya Mahimanam Eti Vita Shokaha. The Mundaka Upanishad completely distinguishes the Lord from the living entities. The living entity is subjected to the reactions of fruitive activity, whereas the Lord simply witnesses such activity and bestows the result. According to the living entity's desires, he is wandering from one body to another and from one planet to another under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Paramatma. However, when the living entity comes to his senses by the mercy of the Lord, he is awarded devotional service. Thus, he is saved from the clutches of Maya. At such a time, he can see his eternal friend, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and become free from all lamentation and hankering. So, this in the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Achintya Bheda Bheda, we are able to see both these things. We are able to reconcile the fact that everything that exists is non-different from the Lord. Whether it is the Lord himself, the Lord's internal energy, or the Lord's external energy, or the marginal energy, everything is emanating from the Lord, therefore it is non-different from him. But at the same time, we also understand this important aspect of what the difference is also. Because if we don't understand this difference, then there is a danger of thinking everything to be God, which is not correct. So the difference also has to be understood, that the marginal, the inferior energy, while it is also the energy of the Lord, if one takes shelter of this external energy, then he will continue to suffer in this material world and he cannot experience eternal happiness. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami is telling that while you are seeing that the Lord is only the source of all these manifestations, you don't focus your attention on these material manifestations, but you focus your attention on the Supreme Lord himself, who is the source of all these energies. This can be possible only if one understands this philosophy of this Achintya Bheda Bheda, where there is this clear distinction also of all the different energies of the Lord. So we will also see this conversation with Ramananda Raya in the 8th chapter of Madhya Leela, where this concept is again explained by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yeah, so in 8th chapter, verse number 151 onwards, Krishnera Ananta Shakti Tate Tina Pradhana Chit Shakti Maya Shakti Jiva Shakti Nama. Krishna has unlimited potencies which can be divided into three main parts. These are the spiritual potency, the material potency, and the marginal potency, which is known as the living entities. Antaranga Bahiranga Tatastha Kahiyare Antaranga Swarupa Shakti Sabara Upare. In other words, these are all potencies of God, internal, external, and marginal. But the internal potency is the Lord's personal energy and stands over the other two. Vishnu Shakti Para Prokta Kshetragyakya Tata Para Avidya Karma Samgyanya Tritiya Shakti Rishyate. The original potency of Lord Vishnu is superior or spiritual, and the living entity actually belongs to that superior energy. But there is another energy called the material energy, and this third energy is full of ignorance. This is a quotation from the Vishnu Purana 6.7.61. Satchidananda Maya Krishnera Swarupa Ateva Swarupa Shakti Hayateen Rupa. Originally, Lord Krishna is Satchidananda Vigraha, the transcendental form of eternity, bliss and knowledge. Therefore, his personal potency, the internal potency, has three different forms. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes on to explain the different internal potencies of the Lord. Then he explains that in the next verse, Halladini Sandini Sambit Trai Eka Sarva Samashraye Hallada Tapakari Mishra Tvai No Guna Varjite. My dear Lord, you are the transcendental reservoir of all transcendent qualities. Your pleasure potency, existence potency, and knowledge potency are actually all one internal spiritual potency. The conditioned soul, although actually spiritual, sometimes experiences pleasure, sometimes pain, and sometimes a mixture of pain and pleasure. This is due to his being touched by matter, but because you are above all material qualities, you are not found in you. These are not found in you. Your spiritual superior potency is completely transcendental, and for you, there is no such thing as relative pleasure, pleasure mixed with pain, or pain itself. So even in this conversation also, this difference Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is bringing out. So after having this understanding of the three different energies of the Lord, the different effects that different energies have on the living entity, the process of self-realization is to make this continuous choice between taking shelter of either the external energy or taking shelter of the internal energy of the Lord. Because we are surrounded only by the Lord and the Lord's energies. The entire world is an expansion of the Lord and the Lord's energies. So, the entire process of spiritual life is to transfer ourselves from the shelter of this material energy to come into the shelter of the spiritual energy. So, this is the program which has been given to us by Srila Prabhupada, where different methods have been given for us to continuously put ourselves in the shelter of the internal energy of the Lord. We have also been given a program where even though we are dealing with the external energy of the Lord, how by the process of Yukta Vairagya, we can deal with this external energy without being entangled by it. So many times people give up this external energy as Maya, but because they do not understand that they can be liberated only if they take shelter of the internal energy, such processes where they are only merely renouncing or taking to some form of meditation where the ultimate goal is not Krishna, therefore they continue to remain in this material world and cannot experience that ultimate happiness. But in the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bheda, the practice of realizing it is to meditate completely always on the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, dovetail all our activities also for Krishna's pleasure, and even if we engage in some form of prayer or worship, that also is completely focused on Krishna. Therefore, because the goal of all our activities, whether it is meditation, whether it is doing some work and offering the results, or whether it is trying to philosophically understand the cause of all causes, because the goal of all these activities is Krishna, which is the internal energy of the Lord, what is happening by following this process is that we are not overcome by the external energy. We are following a process by which we are continuously putting ourselves under the shelter of the internal energy. And therefore, this internal energy, because it is Ananda Nidhi, it is the source of all happiness, the living entity or the devotee who is following this process, he is able to come out of this material world, which is continuously getting manifest and unmanifest. This is not possible in other forms of yoga where Krishna is not the center. Somebody might perform his duties very perfectly, but if those activities are not done for the pleasure of Krishna, even though he is performing his activities well, what he is only ending up is he is getting some punya. But the same devotee, he is also performing those activities. Even though he is not performing it perfectly, but because he is performing it for the pleasure of Krishna, or is trying to perform those activities for the pleasure of Krishna, he is getting a much higher benefit than a person who is also perfectly performing those activities. Similarly, if a yogi, he is performing the Ashtanga Yoga process, but he is not meditating on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then what is happening? He might end up getting so many other benefits like Anima, Lagima, Prapti, as Prabhupada is mentioning in this purport. But these are all, Prabhupada says, the mercy of the external energy of the Lord. This mercy of the external energy of the Lord is only entangling the living entity in this material world. But the same devotee, like Dhruva Maharaj, he also performed Ashtanga Yoga, but because the goal of his meditation is on Krishna, what is happening? He is not getting the mercy of the external energy of the Lord. he is getting the mercy of the internal energy of the Lord. Same way, even when somebody is studying the scriptures, so many Vedas, so many Upanishads we are all studying, but if the goal of this study is not understanding Krishna but understanding so many other things, then also such a person continues to remain under the shelter of the external energy of the Lord. But when devotees, like that illiterate Brahmana of Srirangam, even though he was illiterate, just by looking at the Bhagavad Gita, he was able to remember Krishna. His study is perfect because he is studying under the internal potency of the Lord. So this understanding by which we understand the Lord's different energies and we make a continuous endeavor to come under the shelter of the internal energy of the Lord will help us, as Shukadeva Goswami is telling us, to attain that ocean of bliss and come out of the cycle of birth and death. But any other process we follow in which Krishna is not the center, in which we are not taking shelter of the internal energy of the Lord, but we are taking shelter of his other energies, that Shukadeva Goswami is saying, it will cause anyatra sajjet yata atma pataha. It will only cause degradation of oneself. So these are some of the points of today's verse. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam